Good morning, good morning, good morning. We are on day 14 of the 40-day fast. And I am so excited about everything that God is doing in this process in my life. And I trust that God is doing the same in your life. During this process, we are praying daily. We're praying constantly for you, for your family, for your marriage, because God's heart, his desire is not for our marriages, not for our lives, not for our families to be in shambles. God does not desire for us to live beneath what he has already destined for us. God has a plan, a perfect plan for our lives, for our marriage, for our families. And guys, that is the plan that God wants us to live out. That's the plan that he wants us to live out. Now, yes, we have a choice in making the decision to follow God's plan, or we can continue following our own plan and continue to get and to see what we've always seen. Now, if any type of change is going to come in our life, that change has to be made by us. We have to. God has given us the free will. He's given us the free will, and he's laid it out plainly before us. This is my plan for your life. And your other option is to do exactly what you want to do, whatever you want to do. We have chosen. We have chosen. And sometimes we're not willing to admit our mistakes. And listen, as long as we're not willing to admit our mistakes, nothing, absolutely nothing is going to change. As long as we're not willing to admit where we've gotten off the right track or where we've gotten off course, as long as we're not willing to take responsibility and be accountable, nothing in our lives is going to change. We can continue to live our life blaming others for everything, for every major thing and every minor thing that happens in our life. But the truth is, 99% of the things that happen in our lives and happen to our lives is our own choosing. It's our own choosing. And we have a choice. God has given us free will. None of us is forced to do anything that God has told us to do. We're not forced to do anything. We have choices. And it just so happens that we have been making wrong choices. And when those wrong choices bring into our lives the things that we're currently seeing in our marriages, in our families, in our lives, period, we don't want to take responsibility and hold ourselves accountable for the choices that we've made. But God has given us free will. Free will. At any given time, we can choose to do what he's already instructed us to do. At any given time, we can choose to say, forget you, God. I got this and I can do it on my own. But what has doing it on your own gotten you? What has it cost you? Well, I'm going to tell you what it has cost us. It's cost us our marriages. Doing it on our own has cost us our marriages. It's costing us our families. It's costing us our lives. All simply because we want to do things on our own. We want to do it our way. Nobody has time to do it the right way or to do it God's way. Instead, we look to celebrities, we look to stars, we look to people who are big in our eyes. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if they're doing it right or if they're doing it wrong. If it looks like it's okay, then that's who we follow. And where, again, I'm going to ask you, where has that gotten us? The state of our marriages, the state of our family, it's in dire need of repair. And the only way and the only one who can repair that, somebody says that the ball is in God's court. No. I beg to differ. The ball is not in God's court. The ball is not in God's court. The ball is in your court. The ball is in my court. God has given us the ball. And it's time for us to play game. It's time for us to play the game by the rules of the game. When your methods don't work, it's time to go back. It's time to go back to the things. And maybe you've never tried this before. Maybe you don't know anyone who has tried this before. But that's why God has ordained this time. That's why he's ordained this time. That's why he has ordained this time. God says, go back to the old landmarks. Go back to the old landmark. So, listen, newness is great. Newness is great. And thank God for newness. Thank God for things that are new. But if newness is going to cost you your life, if it's going to cost you your marriage or cost you your family, it's not worth it. It's simply not worth it. And so on this 14th day of the 40-day fast, we're going back. We're going back. And every single thing that God has been telling us and teaching us throughout this process, it's been foundational. It's been foundational. I believe it was on day 4 where God started talking about rebuilding on a clean slate, rebuilding on a clean slate, a fresh start, a new start. Because for the hope and healing to come into marriage and family in your life the way that God has ordained it, the way that God has purposed it to come and to flow and to stay. See, God is not a temporary God. God is not a fickle God. He's not fickle in his emotions. He's not fickle in his thoughts. He's not fickle in his ways. He's constant. And the reason he's able to be constant is because he already knows. He already knows. We know in part. We know part. And then some things we simply don't know at all. We think we know, but we don't know at all. God is not fickle. He's not fickle in his thoughts. He's not fickle in his plans. He's not fickle. And so on this 14th day, we're going to go back. We're going to go back. Sometimes in order for us to go forward, we have to go back. All right, and so I'm going to start off. Our talking theme, our talking point for this morning is love. Our talking point for this morning is love. And guys, I'm saying guys, but I mean all of you. Please share this video. Share it with every person that you can. Share it with everyone that you can and ask them to share it. And especially share it if share it with your husband. Share it with your husbands. Share it with your male friends, your guy friends. Please share this message, because I think that it's needed. I believe that this is needed, and I believe that it's going to help bring about the change that we're wanting to see in our marriages and in our families. Okay, so I'm going to start. Well, and before I start there, husbands. I want to talk to the husbands. This I don't want to say it's a male-driven message, but it's kind of a male-driven lesson. Husbands, your part in this is critical, it's crucial. The success of your marriage, your family, hangs on you. It hangs on you, and it begins with you, and it fails with you. It's a success with you, and it's a failure with you. You're the head. God has set the order so that you are the head. You're the head. And as the head, you have a responsibility. You have a great responsibility. And unfortunately, a lot of men enter marriage without knowing their role, without knowing who they are, and without knowing the role that they are to play in this thing called marriage. And so when you enter marriage without knowing your proper role, without knowing who you are, then we see the things that happen. We see the things that happen. We see the shifts that happen. We see the deterioration that happens. And it all stems from not knowing who you are, from not knowing your place. And when you don't know your place, how can you get in your place if you don't know your place? And this is a moment of being honest. This is a time of being honest. And if you're not willing to be honest with yourself, there is absolutely no way that you can bring about change in your life. There's absolutely no way that you can bring about positive change in your life, in your marriage, in your home. Well, I want to tell you something, and this is for all of the husbands. So share it with your husbands. Share it with your friends. Women, share it with your guy friends. Those who are looking to get married. Share it. And even women, share it with your girlfriends, because it may help them as well. Guys, husbands, your role as a husband, when you make the decision to become someone's husband, you are making the decision to cover her. And when you make the decision to cover her, it is not a light decision. It is not a light decision, because literally what you're saying to God, is, God, I am choosing from this day forward to cover her in the same manner in which Christ covers the church. This is not a light responsibility. So husbands to be, don't take your decision, don't take your position lightly. When you make the decision to become a husband, you make the decision to cover this woman in the same manner that Christ covers the church. You make the decision to cover her in the same way that Christ covers the church. Ephesians 5:23 says, "For the husband is head of the wife, as also Christ is head of the church and Savior of the body." Here's Christ. Christ covers the church. Husband, here is you. You cover your wife. Now, how does Christ cover the church? Husbands, stop taking your hints, your clues of how to be a husband from celebrities, from superstars, from people that you know, I don't want to say aren't living right, but from people that you know are not an ideal candidate for this kind of wisdom. Your pattern, your example is Jesus Christ. Your pattern of how you should be covering your wife, God has already given you the example. Oftentimes we don't want to follow that example because we think it's too hard. We think that we can't do it. But again, God has already ordained strength in you. God is already with you in this process. You have to make the decision. You have to decide whose example you're going to follow. You can follow the example of the world, or you can follow Christ's example. We already know we're in the position that we're in because we've chosen not to follow Christ's example. So how does Christ cover the church? Christ covers the church in love. He covers the church in love. Not at one time. And here's the responsibility. Here's where the responsibility shifts. Not at one time does Christ say, well, I'm going to love the church based on how the church loves me. He doesn't say that. Well, I'm going to cover you based on how you cover me. I'm going to cover you. I'm going to do the things for you based on what you do for me in return. If I don't get nothing in return, I'm not giving you anything in return. Or if I give you anything in return, it's going to be to a lesser degree because you're giving it to me in a lesser degree. Oh, I'm not going to be punked here. I'm not going to be punked here. Whatever you give me is what I'm going to give you. Well, that is not the way that Christ covers the church. Christ doesn't cover the church based on her mistakes. He doesn't cover the church based on her shortcomings. He doesn't cover the church based on how he feels on a particular day. No, he covers the church consistently, constantly, always the same. And it is always depending on his relationship with the church, not on the church's relationship to him. So the church can have a wacky day. That does not change how Christ covers her. The church can decide to walk out on Christ. That does not change how Christ covers her. The church can decide, listen, for the next 7 months, I'm not cooking any food. I'm not washing any dishes. I'm not doing nothing. That does not change how Christ covers her. It does not change how he covers her. And now covering her isn't just, well, covering her is about loving her, but it's not just about loving her. Loving her is so much more than that. Loving the church is loving her in spite of how she feels, in spite of how you feel. and it's protecting her. It's protecting her. Even though she may not think that she needs to be protected, she may not want to be protected, but it's protecting her. It's keeping her. It is sheltering her. And when I say sheltering her, I don't just mean putting a roof over her head. No, it's protecting her spirit. It's protecting her emotions. It's dealing with her emotions and dealing through her emotions. And never, ever changing the love meter. Never, ever letting that love meter change or letting it move, letting it slip. You are the head. And you are supposed to cover your wife in the same way that Christ covers the church. Regardless, you have a responsibility. Only you are going to be held accountable for your actions. Even when your action is a reaction to something, it is still an action, and you and only you are going to be held accountable for your actions. You're the only person that's going to be held accountable for your action. So there is no such excuse as, well, I did it because she did or she didn't. No, you're responsible for your own actions. You are responsible for your own actions. We all are responsible for our own actions. Just like we all are responsible and held accountable for our own choices, so each and every one of us, husband, wife, doesn't matter. We're each responsible for our own actions. Husbands, you're not going to be blamed for your wife's actions. And wives, you're not going to be blamed for your husband's action. You are responsible for your own actions. It doesn't matter what anybody else does. We are each responsible and held accountable for our own actions, not what somebody else does or not what somebody else neglects to do. We're responsible for our own actions. Husbands, you are head. And as the head, you stand in the same place of covering your wife as Jesus Christ stands when he covers the church. Now, in Ephesians 5:25, it says, husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her. There is a command from God, not from your wife, not from anybody else. There is a command from God, husbands, to love your wife. And you know, I believe that there are millions of husbands who love their wives, but who may not know how to love their wives in the way that a woman needs to be loved. Husbands, women are emotional beings. Women are emotional beings. Men are physical beings for the most part. And when it comes to loving your wife is not just the physical things that you do. It's not just you being the provider. It's not just you being the protector, you making sure that she has what she physically needs. If you focus only on your wife's physical needs, her need for food, her need for clothing, her need for a roof over her head, then you're failing to love a big part of who she really is. And a big part of who your wife really is emotions. She emotionally connects with you. And not just to you, but that is her life. She emotionally responds, or she emotionally lives. And now I want to make a disclaimer. This is not in regards to a wife who is not able to control or to master her emotions. You know, because the Word of God says that someone who is not able to master their emotions or to control their emotions is just like a city without walls, meaning anything can come in, you're not protected. There is no protection for you because you're led and you're driven by your emotions. So wives, this is the time of pulling back and getting your emotions in check, in balance rather. Getting your emotions in balance, because without your emotions being in balance, you will live an unhinged life. Meaning you will fly off just because the wind blows. You'll fly off just because the sun shines. Now there is emotional stability that has to come with the growth, that has to come with your growth as a wife. There's an emotional responsibility that has to come with your growth. Yes, we are emotional beings, but we cannot live by our emotions. We cannot allow our emotions to be the driver of our lives. Be emotional, but don't allow your emotions to drive you, because your emotions, if you allow them to, they will drive you to places and they'll desert you. Okay? So we're talking in terms of balance, of balanced emotions. Again, the Word of God says someone who's not able to control someone who allows their emotions to drive them, and they are not the driver of their own emotions, they're like a city without walls that have no protection. Anybody, anything can come in and do whatever they want with it. It's like an open gate for the enemy. So women, we have to be careful. Yes, we are emotional beings, but we have to be careful not to allow our emotions to make us a city without walls that doesn't have any protection, that thieves can come in, that the enemy can come in at any time and pick us off to get to our husbands. We still have responsibility, accountability. We still have that. So husbands, in loving your wives, yes, there is the physical element of love, and that physical element of love, you understand very, very well. You understand it. You get it. But there's also that emotional part of loving who she is. Now, does that mean that you have to be all sappy with her? No, that's not what that means. What that means is being able to see her heart. Being able to see her heart. Do you know that your wife isn't always asking you for more? Your wife isn't always asking you to be more. to make more money, to get a bigger house, to get another car, a better car, a bigger car. She's not always asking you that. Sometimes she's asking you. Her emotions are asking you for help. 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 Husbands, if you're not careful, you can find yourself living with your beautiful wife in a beautiful home. And in the inside, she's starving, she's crying, and she's dying for you to touch her in the place where only you can touch her. And this touch is not a physical touch, it's an emotional touch. It's an emotional touch. And that touch, when you touch her, that touch says, he hears me, he sees me. And sometimes that cry for help is, I'm working, you're working, help me. Help me. Guys, when you learn to meet your wife's emotional need, touching her in that place that only you can get to, that only you can touch her in, she will touch you in that place that only she can touch you in, or that only she should be able to touch you in. So what does that look like? Well, here is how it may look like. Here's what it may look like. Here's what you loving her emotionally, touching her emotionally may be. Touching her emotionally, touching that emotional part of her may be just opening your eyes and seeing her. Opening your eyes and seeing her. Seeing the things that she does to run the household or to keep the household running. Husband, if you get tired, guess what? Your wife, she gets tired too. Physically, emotionally, probably even spiritually. She gets tired. See that. See that, and not just see it, but respond to it. See it and respond to it. Take the load off of her. Sometimes that is all she's asking for. So the nagging that you hear, some of the nagging may even be, I need you to touch me, not physically, but I need you to touch me emotionally. She's raising your kids. She's raising your kids. She's being a mother, she's being mom, she's being wife. But what are you doing? What are you doing to touch her emotionally? Do you even see her emotionally? It's the little things. The little things. And sometimes that little thing could very well be you deciding to pick the kids up, take them to a babysitter, and just allow her to rest. Sometimes that could be touching her emotionally, could be you getting the kids up, you getting them dressed, you getting them to school, you being responsible for making breakfast. No, it's probably not going to be what she would want for them to be, would want breakfast. It's probably not going to look like the breakfast that she had in mind for them. Guys, if you don't clean, if you don't know how to clean house, and you get it that she doesn't like the way that you clean, there are services. There are services that can assist you with that. Take the load off. Helping her to ease her load frees up her emotions. And when her emotions are freed up, she is able to love you the way that you desire to be loved. And not only that, but it helps her to know that you love her. Loving her, not physically. We're not talking physically here, because you probably do well there. We're talking about emotionally. Emotionally. Seeing her, hearing her, anticipating her needs, anticipating it. Before she even asks. You know, Ephesians 5, and this is verse 29. It says, "For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as the Lord does the church." Your wife is a part of you. Your wife is a part of you. And the two shall become one. The two shall become one. Your wife is a part of your body. She's a part of you. She's a living, breathing, functioning part of you. And in the same manner that you would nourish your own body, it's the same manner in which you are to nourish her. It's the same manner in which you are to cherish her. Make her your priority. Now when I say, let me add this disclaimer here. I shouldn't have to add a disclaimer, because you know the order: God, husband, wife. When you make your wife a priority, you're not putting her ahead of God. No, you're putting her ahead of everything else. You're making her a priority. The church is God's priority. The church is Christ's priority. Nothing and no one comes before his bride, his church. Nothing and no one comes before her. He loves her. Even though she may be an emotional wreck, he loves her and he tends to her. And he sees those things in her, sometimes even before she sees it. And he doesn't call it out like shaming her. Nuh-uh. He protects his own. And he covers her. He covers her. He covers her. He nourishes her. Do you know where the church gets her strength from? Yeah. That's where your wife should also get her strength from. She should be the strongest woman in your life. She should be the strongest woman in your life, because that is strength that she should be getting from you. Guys, take the time. I would challenge you to just sit with God and read Ephesians 5. Sit with God and read Ephesians 5 and ask God, God, open my understanding, not just to your word, God, but to where I am supposed to be as her husband. How am I supposed to cover her? How should I be covering her? How should I be loving her? Listen, love your wives the way that Christ loved the church. And here's the great thing about that. In order for you to love her the way that Christ loves the church, you're going to have to love yourself, and you're going to have to love God in the process. So finding out how to love her sends you back to God. It sends you back to God. Deepens and strengthens your relationship with him. And it takes all of that. Just like with a seed, it takes the rain, it takes the sunshine, it takes all of those things in order for the plant to grow and give the harvest that's promised in it. So it takes all of that. It takes all of that. Guys, I love you. And I pray God's blessings on your, not just your day, but your life, your marriage, and your family. Guys, you got this. You got this. Love you guys. Have a great and blessed day.